Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's really fabulous to be here with the WCN family once again. I will miss seeing so many of you in person, but I'm really excited for this virtual online WCN Expo adventure. I'm going to start my talk today with a memory of the first cheetah family I ever saw in the wild. They weren't in wide open savannas, in protected areas or reserves. They were in a small reserve in southern Botswana in acacia bushland environments, surrounded by livestock farming lands, scattered with traditional cattle posts and fenced ranchlands. Whilst doing cheetah track surveys, we came across the cheetah family in the late summer sun playing in the deep sand road ahead. It was a welcome treat because we rarely see cheetahs in the wild. They need to be sensibly elusive to avoid the dangers of living around livestock farming lands. So this was really wonderful for me. The bravest of these cheetah family was this young male. He approached the vehicle, put his feet up on the tires and started vocalizing like he was chatting to me. It was such a touching experience. But I was really concerned for them as well. Just outside, there was livestock farming lands, and although the reserve was fenced, it didn't provide for the wide-ranging needs of cheetah behaviors. So soon the young cheetahs would leave through the porous fence line, and they would have to navigate their way through all of the challenges inherent in living alongside humans. It was one of those aha moments, and it really sort of furthered my determination to help clear the way for their survival, because in these areas, cheetahs needed to be so adaptable and resilient. And cheetahs really need our help. Due to habitat loss, declining prey populations, human-wildlife conflict, and illegal trade, the cheetah population has crashed in the last 100 years, from only 100,000 cheetahs in 1900 to now less than 7,000 cheetahs. And their range has contracted considerably, only 23% of the areas where they used to roam. Botswana has one of the largest cheetah populations left on Earth, with 2,000 individuals, connecting the rest of the southern African cheetah population. The animal, the fastest land animal on Earth, just superbly adapted for speed. They sacrifice strength for speed during their evolution, so they're unable to protect themselves against apex carnivores in protected areas, such as lions and spotted hyenas. So 80% of Botswana's cheetahs are found outside protected areas, where they then have to share the land with farming communities who often see them as a threat to their livelihoods, and retaliatory killings are a huge concern for the future of this population. The question is, how does a species that's so adapted for speed live in such acacia bushlands and also fraught with dangers from humans? And Cheetah Conservation Botswana was set up in 2003 to address some of these questions and to help communities to live together with cheetahs and other carnivores. Through a holistic array of activities, including scientific research, community outreach, environmental education, supporting farmers to live with cheetahs and other carnivores, we do our work to ensure that coexistence really can be possible. It's never an easy feat, and we've had all kinds of challenges thrown at us throughout the years, including droughts, fires, floods. We're really surprised to add pandemic to the list now. At the beginning of the year, it was business as usual. We started our series of farmer training workshops with the Government Youth Development Fund, equipping young new farmers with the tools and knowledge they would need to live together with cheetahs and other carnivores. Our first bush camp of the year had gone amazingly well. Everyone had a fabulous time. Our research team had just finished a new camera trap survey in the farmlands near the Central Kalahari Game Reserve. And although we'd heard of an outbreak of COVID in Asia, we didn't really think too much of it. We were so far away. And we're very isolated here in Botswana as well. It's a landlocked country in the middle of southern Africa, about the size of Texas, and we only have about 2 million people. So it's one of the lowest human population densities in the world, and actually one of the least human impacted landscapes in Africa today. And this isolation, these low human population densities have great advantages. We have the highest population of cheetahs, of wild dogs, brown hyenas, and one of the highest populations of lions. And in the Western Kalahari, we also have the incredible Kalahari San Bushman tribes. And these are the ancient custodians of this wonderful wild land. 39% of Botswana's land is devoted to wildlife conservation in either national parks or reserves or dual use areas where people live alongside wildlife, and that's the light green in this map here. And one of the wildest areas is in the Western Kalahari, and this is where we find most of the cheetahs. And this is where we're also based there, and this is where our field camp calls home. And it is where we started our largest foray into large-scale landscape conservation, uniting all of the stakeholders in a unified approach at conservation. When last year we were engaged by the United Nations Development Programme to develop a human-wildlife coexistence strategy, which will enable the persistence of this amazingly wild landscape. Through participatory planning with communities, we were working towards improving the wildlife monitoring and management, reducing the human-wildlife conflict, developing cultural tourism activities, ecotourism sites throughout the landscape, and also finding markets for the amazing medicinal plants that you find in the ecosystem, and also the crafts, the traditional crafts that the Kalahari Bushmen produce. And all of these activities, these developments, would really support the community to develop wildlife-based economies that would enable them to become conservationists for their area and see a value in living with these incredibly wild places. So for our organization in the region, it was actually a fantastic start to the year, but we had to acknowledge the threat of COVID coming closer. And our country, Botswana, this is one of the main income generators for the country, is through wildlife tourism, second only to diamonds. And tourists flock to Botswana every year, and often coming from countries where they had quite escalating rates of COVID infection. Our rural communities are often very remote with little access to medical facilities. Tuberculosis and HIV are very prevalent. So we realized COVID could be a really serious threat. And the communities were already suffering from increasing human-wildlife conflict off the back of last year's drought. So we had to ask ourselves, how are we going to adapt? How are we going to be resilient as an organization? And like the cheetah, we would have to adapt our approaches and find new ways to support our communities in this changing landscape. One of our primary focuses of the organization is human-wildlife coexistence, and our Farming for Conservation program focuses on this, providing tools and knowledge to farmers to improve their livestock operations and reduce conflict. And our Livestock Guardian Dog program is instrumental in this, and we promote the use of these beautiful Tswana dogs who are perfectly adapted to the environment, locally available, and incredibly cost-effective. Since 2013, we started training dogs at our own demonstration farm. And since then, we've placed 130 dogs across the landscape in Botswana. 67 of these are active currently in our Western Kalahari focal area. And they reduce conflict up to 80% and even up to 100% for many people. And so more and more people need livestock guarding dogs. But at our demonstration farm, we can only raise about 20 livestock guardian dogs every year. So our first adaptation of this year was really to decide how we were going to increase the number of livestock guardian dogs available. And we reached out to our wonderful model farmers that are part of our farmers network. And 3 farmers were selected to start to train livestock guardian dog puppies at their farms themselves so that we could double the number of livestock guardian dogs available to farmers in need in conflict with cheetahs. And one of the first of these was Jeffrey Moyer. Jeffrey contacted us in 2015 when he was having problems with cheetahs, and he lost 20 goats in a very short space of time. So we placed 2 dogs with him, and he's never lost a goat since. Since his time was freed up from herding, he was able to diversify his farming operation, and he's got a thriving agricultural business. We regularly take farmers to his farm for peer-to-peer learning so he can share his experience with new farmers and farmers needing support. And he provides all of the vegetables to the local supermarkets, schools, and also to our environmental bush camp. So he's become so much more resilient and diversified his income. And let's hear from Jeffrey himself.
In fact, I did have a problem before of white animals, which is cheetah, which was roaming around here, killed a lot of my animals, especially the goats. So actually, after a little bit of a while, striking all this how to solve this problem, I approached Cheetah with their cooperation. They came front and helped me to train dogs, which they gave to me. I did train one for myself, and it's doing well. So after they gave me those dogs, I mean, I've never lost any goat of mine through cheetah. And I've never seen a track of a cheetah close to my area anymore. So actually, all my goats are doing well. And when the goats do well, also my life goes very excellent. It really cut off my ample time, my rough time that I was using, checking them in the bush. So I took that time back to develop my own place. So if goats are born well, taken care well, I sell to the government, I sell to the people, I sell to the community also. I use that money to build up where I'm staying, to uplift my life. So I really appreciate Cheetah people. I did lose a lot, but I gained a lot from there. So I sometimes, people, human beings, we come to the places, we make a friction between white animals and ourselves. But now, we should not kill them, because our kids tomorrow need to see them. And we need to preserve them, that the future generation will see what is the cheetah, not by books, by physically seeing what does the cheetah look like. So that's why the dogs are here, to scare them away, not to kill them. So I really appreciate a lot from Cheetah.
Jeffrey's diversified agricultural operation meant that he was now a lot more resilient. And when lockdown was announced on the 30th of March, he was able to continue having an income by providing his crops to the government. Now was our next challenge. The government only gave us 3 days before lockdown was initiated, and we had 11 livestock guarding dog puppies to place out with communities scattered across the Western Kalahari. And an amazing effort, our Farming for Conservation team worked day and night to place these puppies to the farmers who were experiencing conflict with cheetahs so that they could weather the lockdown with much safer herds. But what next for our wonderful team, who are always so busy out there in the communities providing support? Well, our lockdown was very strict, and you had to stay in your home and your garden, and you weren't allowed to go out for any reason without a permit. So we had to adapt, and many of our staff started working from home, others at the remote field camp, And we started doing all of the work that often gets pushed into the background: computer work, online training, analyzing camera trap photos, data analysis, etc. Probably our luckiest team members were those that were actually in our Western Kalahari camp. And they were able to enjoy the wide open spaces and have no movement restrictions on our 2,000 hectare farm. And they carried on with important maintenance work, you know, all of those activities that sort of, when we have so much field activities going on, often fall into the background. So we made the most of the opportunity to have some downtime. And as the dawn of the lockdown began, we started planning how we were going to continue to support our communities. COVID had not yet arrived, but it could well do so very soon. So we would need to be nimble and continue to be adaptable with the support that was needed. Well, after 6 weeks, when lockdown was lifted, our Farming for Conservation team was able to be classified as essential services. We were able to get back to the communities and provide support. And one of the first calls we had was from the Ministry of Environment, informing us that the President was having terrible losses on his farm, what they believed to be jackals and cheetahs. So we went to provide support. Our Farming for Conservation team gave them advice on how they could improve their livestock enclosures and their management approaches. And we also lent them our very best livestock guarding dog gift. And he held the fort while we continued to train 2 livestock guarding dogs that would then go and take Gift's place. Our research team was able to start up work as well, and they continued with the spore surveys and the wildlife monitoring with the community sand trackers as part of the human-wildlife coexistence strategy implementation. They also started the biggest camera trap survey outside protected areas that's ever been done in Botswana to provide more information on farmland cheetahs. But the schools were still closed and the communities were still in need of support. So we continued to adapt our approaches, and now we have our wonderful engagement and awareness coordinator, Jane Horgan, to give you an update on how we continue to inspire the young people and support our communities in their time of need.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be with you all today. By the time July rolled around, the schools in Botswana had already been closed for 4 months, and we knew that our kids at home were getting up to all sorts of mischief. And look at my kids, they're literally climbing the walls. Homeschooling is hard at the best of times, but keep in mind the fact that the Botswana government thought it was a great idea to ban the sale of alcohol prior to lockdown. So we were dealing with homeschooling, lockdown, and no alcohol whatsoever. So there was a pretty decent mental health crisis going on in Botswana at the time. Considering that, we knew that our education team really needed to pivot so that we could engage those kids that were stuck at home and to help their poor parents. We initiated an online art competition, asking students around Botswana to illustrate different scenes from a new storybook entitled Tabe, the Cheetah Hero. We received illustrations from all across Botswana, which will adorn the book that will be published and distributed in schools later this year. As fate would have it, it was also this year that we decided to launch our new early childhood education playgroup, Learn to Play. The idea came from the communities themselves that highlighted the lack of early childhood education as a priority needs area for them, and they approached us for support in rectifying this. Partnering with early childhood development experts from Habaroni, women from the community were trained to run the playgroup, providing much needed income source for these mamapreneurs and environmentally focused curriculum for the students. Of course, they were only running for 2 months when they were put on hold due to lockdown, but our partners were able to adapt the curriculum so that the mamas could pivot and engage the students in home visits. That way, the kids could continue to be engaged, even though the mamas were unable to open the playgroup classroom. Our Learn to Play initiative is part of our newest program called Communities for Conservation. This aims on empowering communities in strategic conservation areas to develop wildlife-based economies so that they have a direct benefit from conserving nature. Knowing that these incredibly isolated communities would have become vulnerable during lockdown, we decided to adapt the nature of our support, working very closely with the government to deliver exactly what these communities needed when they needed it. According to the communities, their needs were simple. They needed masks, soaps, water, and locally relevant information. So we set about targeting those specific goals, including cheetah-themed hygiene posters in the local languages, so that the people could keep themselves safe. This is Veripi. She's the coordinator for our Learn to Play playgroup in Kaka. When we needed to engage local sewing groups to produce the masks for our 4 target communities, she stepped up and made 630 masks for every person in her home village of Kaka. For her, it was a wonderful business experience, and she was able to earn over 1 year's salary with just this order, which took her only a couple of weeks to produce. Here she is to share with you what that meant for her and her family.
Le go itlhabolla hela mo lapeng go tsenya bana dikolo ke na le bana yo mongwe o ko New Era ko Gaborone yo mongwe ko University of Namibia mme ke lebogela Cheetah ka gore e ne ya kgona go selecta gore ke to go kgona go ba irela di-mask tse ke kgona go na le lemenyane le ba le mphileng le ke le lebogela hela thata ebile se tsentse ke ba rotloetsa ke ba kopa gore nya mme ha le ka bona tshono gape ko le nne le ntse le nkgopola hela ka gore ke lengwe la manane a go tlhabolla go ntsha Batswana mo lehumeng ka gore ke ne ke senang sa le ke apply tse grant itse le ya damejere ka 2017 ke me people like 1.550 hela gore ke go duela mme ka madi a ICCB ya ke kgona go duela 1.6 ayo 1.650 kgona go mo duela hela immediately ba senana ba mpha madi ke tsamile ke go tsenya grant ke setse ke itsentsele e ntlhabolotse ka ha ke boneng ka teng hela setse ke leboga ke renya mme ke lebogela ba Cheetah go gore CCB ina le mosola hela o motona mo go rona e botlhokwa mo go rona re le batho ba Khaga re setsaneng tse re to go tshela le yone re setsaneng tse re ikopa gore le modimo a tswela e tshegetse e kgone go na ntse re gopola hela batho ba kgalo ya tenyane teng ba ka kwana
In total, we commissioned 2,600 masks for every single person in the villages of Bere, Kaka, East Hanahai, and West Hanahai. Engaging with 3 different local sewing groups, we were so happy to be able to provide income that went straight into the pockets of these guys right at their time of need. I'll see you guys in the question and answer session. For now, it's back to Rebecca.
We've realised that the key to resilience is adaptability, and we're very proud at how our wonderful field team has managed to adapt to our new normal. We've been able to continue to support our stakeholders and continue to implement the human-wildlife coexistence strategy that was developed earlier in the year. And in July, we started off the community trust meetings to work with the communities to develop diversified livelihoods that will bring value to wildlife through these socially distanced community meetings. Our demonstration farmers have been doing a fabulous job at training their puppies that will soon go out to their own local communities. Our research team is back in the field still, and with the camera track server, they started training farmers themselves to check the camera tracks. So if lockdowns have to happen again, we're able to have the farmers collect the photos and we don't have to have any loss in data. And also it gets farmers more engaged and more excited about the wildlife on their land. Though we can't have farmers workshops for the rest of the year, our team has gone out on the road with the curriculum, providing the tools and resources to support farmers to coexist with cheetahs and other carnivores. No bush camps either, but we've developed bush camp workbooks that we're sharing with environmental groups, environmental clubs in schools across the country, continue to inspire young people. Our Learn to Play free schools have started up again. Now they've fulfilled the government protocols. We're very excited that they've been initiated. And the livestock guarding dog program is alive and well. The President's 2 livestock guarding dogs have grown from rambunctious puppies to measured and effective livestock guardians. And since they've been placed, he hasn't lost 1 head of livestock. Throughout the years, we've learned and uncovered that farmland cheetahs are incredibly resilient, even though they live in an environment that might not be considered optimal cheetah habitat. They survive very well outside of protected areas and are much more adaptable than often given credit for. And we think that if an animal that is so specialized can survive in the face of such incredible challenges, that we as humans can continue to do the same in the face of these pandemics, the fires, the hurricanes, all of the challenges we've been experiencing this year. And from all the team at Cheetah Conservation Botswana, we want to say that we could not do it without you. We have received so much support from everyone throughout this year, even though everyone is having such a hard time. We want to thank those who've supported us, those who've reached out, has helped us to pivot and adapt our activities to this changing landscape that we're all working in. And from our staff, from our communities, and from the Kalahari cheetahs, we thank you so much. Re leboha tata.